So, welcome to another episode of speaking to the best global content marketing leaders from across the world. And today we are streaming here from New York City, right across Times Square, and very excited. And it's a pleasure to have Mark Cajigao from AAA Northeast. Mark is the director of content at AAA Northeast. Someone who has kind of seen the industry go from print to digital, worked very closely in it. Someone who comes in from a theater background with a knack of storytelling, in maybe the blood across the board, and someone who's seen the journey from what life looks at, like at McKinsey, to then at AAA Northeast, a 125-year-old company, like a legendary company, building convictions across digital channels, learning it all from scratch. Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here on the studio.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Super. So I think, Mark, before we kind of just go deeper into knowing the stories of your work, experiences, all of these things, love to know Mark as a person, right? So like I told you, right, I always break these conversations up into knowing Mark as a person, Mark as a professional, Mark as an AI learner, and maybe then Mark as I can choose that, maybe a bathroom singer or rock star or whatever that would be, the last one, right? Let's start with knowing Mark as a person. Where do you grew up? How has life been overall? You were just telling me before we started rolling that back then when you got out of college, people used to get the easiest job that actors used to get is being a waiter, but you didn't choose doing that. So would love to know all the story from the beginning, right? And then I think we can go deeper into your experiences. But how did life grow up, and how did you end up being in content to what we call it today?
Right. Yes, I was never my intent to end up in content. I graduated from college with 2 degrees, a degree in musical theater and a degree in English. And I came to the city just like all other young actors with, visions of fame and fortune and my name on the marquees right outside here in Times Square. And, this was back in the mid-90s. And the process was you come to the theater, you audition, and in order to pay your rent, you become a waiter or a bike messenger or a waitress. So you had some flexibility to be able to go audition at the drop of a hat. But I didn't really want to do that. I did not. I like the idea of having to wait on people at tables or ride a bike around the city delivering documents. So I got a job for a publishing company as a temp, just as an editorial assistant. And I found very quickly that I liked the luxury of having a desk and air conditioning and talking to really interesting people and working on very interesting content. There was a lot of science content I was working on, and I got to speak to these very intimidating but really genius people who were writing these books at the time. Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, who were, writing books on evolution. And it was fascinating. And my acting career started to, fall by the wayside as I got seduced by a regular paycheck and health insurance. And over time, I would get pulled back into acting, and I would do some auditioning, and I never really did. I did some off-Broadway stuff, but I never, it never became my main source of income because I kept getting hired by these small publishing companies. And I remember very clearly one day I was working, this was a large publishing company, but just to give you some context, I was working at my job, sitting at my desk, and someone from IT came in and said, if I could sit at your desk for a few minutes, I want to give you email. And we had no idea we knew what email was, but we didn't really know how it was going to work in the office. And you'd think I'm talking about the 1850s, but it was actually only, 30 years ago, less than 30 years ago that we started. And I remember we used to write emails to each other in the office, and they would be like pages long, because that was the medium. We'd stop calling each other, and you'd spend your time writing these long emails and reading these long emails. But anyway, content was not online back then. It was still primarily a print medium. But as the internet started becoming more and more popular and people were using it for marketing, because I worked for generally small places, we didn't have an IT team. We didn't have anybody to do this. So the publisher or the editorial director would come to me and say, "We need to have some sort of online presence because this other magazine is doing it, so we have to do it." So I would teach myself HTML, and I would buy a domain, and we would basically put up a splash page that had the company's name and their address on it, and a phone number and a fax number. And that was how we used the internet back then. But as you know, things happen very quickly, and people started to put content online. And
this was not called content then, right?
no, it was not called content. It was called articles, stories. We'd put this story online. And I worked for a magazine that was, it doesn't exist, well, it exists, but it's now part of a larger suite of magazines. It was called Art and Auction, and it followed the business side of the art world, not art criticism or art theory or anything like that, but purely who bought what, how much did they pay for it, what's going up at the galleries, and what's going on in the undercurrent of the industry. It's a very old industry. Lots of deals were done, behind closed doors and handshakes, and it was a lot of intrigue, and I found it to be very interesting. Although going into it, I had no idea about the art world, and I quickly learned, and I started to learn then that I don't need to really have a specialty to get work in this business. I can learn fast enough, and I'm curious enough that whether it's working in the art world or working in college textbooks, I seem to have this facility to be able to dive in and become fascinated and want to know more. So getting off track here, but we would put up an article online, and our articles were written for the magazine, and some of them were lengthy, 10,000, 15,000 words.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long before we realized content on a page in a magazine is not the same as content on a screen.
Yeah.
It's not a one-to-one transfer.
Yep.
So, the first thing is like, well, we have to cut them down then. They have to be shorter. That's not the only thing. It has to be written for the medium that the consumer is going to view it on. It's not as simple as that. And things started happening very quickly with CMSs being invented. We decided. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, and I know it may not be something that you saw in my CV, but some friends and I was friends with some writers.
Okay.
Some who have gone on to become published novelists. There's one playwright that I was friends with who now is a major playwright. We decided to experiment with this new medium called the internet, and we started to create this. We created this little online magazine called Taint Magazine. And we published poetry, fiction, nonfiction, plays. We published photos of people's artwork. We tried to do it all. And this was before WordPress. This was before Wix or anything like that. We actually developed our own CMS without knowing what a CMS was. But it was basically a repository of content that was tagged and organized in a certain way that when a person went to the website and clicked on they would be delivered this content, and you could filter it. So it was really primitive, and it was really very clunky. But and had I been smart enough, I probably could have sold it.
Yeah, because
and made $1 million on it. But instead, that we did this magazine online for about 5 years. It was a labor of love. We got maybe we went from no one looking at it to maybe a couple thousand views a day by the end, which was more than I thought it would, because we didn't set out doing it to make money or anything. It was just an experiment. And I think I learned a lot in doing that little
There's
magazine.
early 2000s?
Huh?
This early 2000s?
It launched in 2001, and we folded it in late 2004.
This is like a much pre-CMS era.
Yeah, and it was and because we all got busy, it became very, very. It was a labor of love. It took a lot of work, and I just didn't have time to do it anymore. And my friends, they all One got a book publishing deal, one became a playwright, another person moved to Chicago. So we just said, okay, we've done it, tie a bow on it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. But we did learn a lot in that. So this was the early the early 1990s, and then into the 2000s. People started realizing that content just couldn't be taken from a magazine
Yeah.
or printed and thrown online. And then they tried, I remember we had these templates before websites were responsive, before they were, before mobile. There were templates that we had to
Yeah.
fit all content into.
Yes.
Everything had to have the same headline, and it was very rigid and, very Web 2.0, not sexy, that's what I was talking about. Sorry. The professor of the textbook that I was editing, he was famous in Princeton for having these lectures that people would come and sit in even though they weren't in his class because they were so entertaining. And he would use audiovisual elements, some just for humorous purposes, and he would have a screen and he would lecture about abnormal psychology. And he would play these things with it, and it was eye-opening because it was a very scientific subject, very dry, but he peppered it in with stories and things from the internet and videos that he had and images and made it an experience. And I said to myself, that is so cool. It would be great if we could take his textbook and try to bring some of that personality and some of that magic into the dry textbook. So we did. We worked really hard to license photos of movies and things that you normally wouldn't see in a textbook or famous works of art to depict, of course, Edvard Munch's The Scream and other things to illustrate depictions of mental anguish and paranoia and things. So it was like a coffee table book and less like a textbook. And that idea carried with me that everything that I wanted to do in print and online should have some sort of elevated quality to it, so that you knew that you weren't just reading static words.
The pull-based factor, basically.
Yeah, and I said, when we got email installed at our desks and we were putting splash pages up, that I knew that whatever the internet was invented for, it wasn't that it was yet to come, that we still hadn't figured out what we were going to use the internet for. At one point, I was done with publishing because what had happened was the internet had changed things so dramatically and so quickly. Publishing industry really started to crash, and larger companies started to buy smaller companies, and every job I had suddenly became an issue of being in danger due to a larger merger or acquisition.
Yeah.
And I found myself out of a job a few times just because of redundancy issues. And they would close imprints because they weren't making money. So I went back to acting. And I went and got a graduate degree in acting.
Oh, nice.
While I still was doing freelance copy editing, and so I was never fully out of that. But the way acting informed, and my theater studies informed my my working with content and storytelling really took a different turn after I got my graduate degree in acting, and I was working at this. I was working at this small magazine while I was in acting school, grad school at the New School, and I had an editor there, my boss, who taught me a very valuable lesson, and it stuck with me. And he said, as we were looking at proofs of a magazine page, he said, what you need to think of first and foremost is the audience. So if you see a picture in a magazine and it's got a dog and a chair and a window and drapes, you have to ask yourself, if a reader looks at that picture, what is the information they want? What kind of dog is it? Where did that chair come from? Who made those drapes? This was a shelter magazine.
Yeah.
It was a home magazine at
sense.
the time. So you have to write everything anticipating those questions from your reader. And he said, because I was a managing editor at that time, and every page of the magazine was coming to me to be approved before it went to print or went online, he said, you need to ask yourself, have we answered every possible question that a reader might ask as they read these things? So I became sort of they call it an ombudsman for the reader, or a public advocate for the reader. So I was always sending things back saying, we need more information on this, or kicking it back to the editor. And that audience first approach was easily transferable to my later in my career when I became a marketer, quite by accident, and found myself working on websites. I fell into the formal content biz by accident because once again I graduated from grad school with a degree in acting and didn't want to wait tables.
Yeah.
So I went back to publishing. This was many years later in my life. I had a wife. We were starting a family. So I couldn't wait tables. I also couldn't take an acting job that took me out of the city on tour or anything.
Yeah.
So I fell back on publishing. And now we're talking 2010, around there.
Digital is there.
Yeah,
in the
it's there.
now.
Yes. And I was hired. I saw a job for the Roundabout Theater Company as a web producer. And I said, wow, this is the first job that I've actually seen where I could take my love of theater and my interest and knowledge in theater and combine it with the experience I've had putting content online.
Yeah.
So I was hired as a web producer, but that quickly became more of a marketing position because we launched a new website. I helped them with the structure and organizing the content, but then there really wasn't much to do other than keep the thing running. Change the pictures, update the prices, update the content in the CMS. And funnily enough, this was in 2011, and I don't know if you can remember, responsive websites and mobile websites were not the norm back then. It was still so we launched this website and it still wasn't responsive.
Yeah.
We had a separate mobile app. So there were two platforms I had to update all the time. It wasn't, create once, publish everywhere. It was create once for this and create once for that. And I noticed Netflix, which was a company that I always really admired for their user interface and, of course, their business model. I'd been a Netflix customer from the very beginning with getting DVDs mailed to me. I noticed that if you looked at Netflix on your desktop, you had a different experience from looking at it on your phone. And they wrote different copy. It wasn't just the sort of thing where copy was truncated when you looked at it on your phone. It was just cut off. It was a separate blurb that fit that space. And I said, wow, that's really cool. Someone is paying attention to that, and that is a level of user experience that I haven't encountered anyplace else. So I started bringing stuff like that to our little website at Roundabout. And that wasn't that wasn't a responsive website. So then the next time when we redid the website, I made sure that it had all of the bells and whistles. We probably launched a website that was the Rolls-Royce of theater websites back in the day, just because of the things that we could do with, I call it marketing automation. It wasn't really, it certainly wasn't AI driven, but it was sort of things like,
basic automation, at least like the workflows are set in some sense.
Yeah, and we could serve different content to different people coming from different places. That was a huge thing back then, and it was very successful. And I was really interested in all of the information that we could get from our audiences and how we could segment them. We knew how much money they spent on wine in a given month. We knew where they lived. We knew, we could...
Playing with data, basically.
Yeah, we had access to all of this data, and we could segment in ways that I had never thought possible for a theater. So we could serve different content to customers who were tourists and only in the city, or people who lived on Long Island or New Jersey. And that was a real game changer. Thing that editor taught me a long time ago is always think of the audience first. I am still amazed today when I see things on LinkedIn where someone is saying the phrase audience first.
Yeah.
As if it's a new concept.
No, it's not.
I don't understand why it is not the status quo for everything.
Yeah.
That I still, when I was a contractor and I was working in different places, a consultant working in different places, I was still really amazed that I would talk to people at a business and they'd say, well, we need a video for this, and we have a $15,000 budget for this video, and we need to produce this. And then I would say, okay, who is the audience? And they wouldn't really be able to give me a clear. And I'd say, well, how has video performed for you previously? And they'd say, well, this one not so good. We got about 500 views on YouTube. So I'd say, okay, well, maybe we should think about,
what do audiences want?
thank you, maybe this could be an email,
Yeah.
not a video.
Not a video.
So I was never the type of person that would chase the new shiny thing, and we can talk about that when we talk about AI. I would always wait and see how things panned out before I would invest time and energy. Maybe I've been too cautious in my career, but I also haven't had any mistakes where I've thrown all of our resources behind Periscope videos or something like that didn't last long, became other things, and now we have Reels, we have TikToks, we have things like that. That all started as a Periscope or as a Facebook Live video. We didn't do those things because I wasn't impressed with the quality.
Perfect. So I'm also very curious, Mark, to understand, right, after having seen print to acting to print publishing, digital publishing back again, right, from there to moving to a theater company, I think you've become digitally savvy over a period of time. Now, okay, let me put it this way. What does it feel for a filmmaker or maybe a painter or maybe a creative artist to go all together to now become amidst a league of mathematicians or maybe the left brainers? So it's basically a league of right brainers now trying to enter the left brainers as soon as you move to McKinsey after this, right? So three things I would want to know, right? One, what was the cultural difference like for you, first of all? Second, you were till now being able to see the impact of what you worked on immediately. You put on a website, next day you see an impact. You put on a work of content, next day you see an impact. You put in an article, next day you see an impact. But in a giant setup like that of a McKinsey, things going to take time for it to show impact. So how did that feeling look like? Because now you've come all together as a smaller fish in a large pond, basically. So what was that like? And of course, it has its pros and cons both, basically, right? And third, very interestingly, wanting to know, how was it to build the creative and content acumen amidst the people over there? Because here, what you're going to do, see, the knack of storytelling is very important when they sell, basically. You being an editorial strategist had to sell stories over there, right? So how did you build that conviction amidst people? And when I say conviction, I just don't mean conviction. I also mean, how did you make them learn about telling those stories otherwise, right? So these three things would be super interesting to know.
Well, it's funny because when you have storytelling skills, and everybody claims to be a storyteller, but they'll tell you that it's useful not only just in making content, but it's also useful in convincing people of your ideas.
Yeah.
And, if you go to a place like McKinsey, the easiest way, or any place that has a corporate structure, the easiest way to convince people that your idea is a good one is to show them the potential impact in black and white. You can show them previous stories or previous ideas that have worked and the impact that it had, this much readership. Now, when I worked at McKinsey, I was more of a process person because I've always had a very, as well as being creative, I've been very lucky to be very organized and being able to set up editorial.
Unlike most of the creative people I know.
No, it's like, yeah, and I'm sure I sacrifice a lot of creative energy to that pragmatic part of my brain, but it's also been something in my career that has allowed me to stay on a higher level so that I can see the process and see how it affects the creative
Yeah.
side. So when I went to McKinsey as a consultant, I was really there as a process consultant. They have a very successful process of the way they publish of their thought leadership. I can't speak in too many specifics, and it also has changed since I've been there.
Okay.
As I was leaving, they were restructuring a little bit. So my experience there may not add up to the way it is now, but what I've found, going back to one part of your question, the transition from going from a place like Roundabout Theater Company, where you have celebrities and stars and access to creative people who are willing to do anything on camera for you or make backstage content and post it for you, moving from that type of an environment to a corporate environment, I found that the people that I was working with in the corporate environment were no less creative or collaborative than the people I was working with on Broadway. In fact, one of the jobs, I worked for a small financial company, a global asset company, right after Roundabout, and I thought I was going to go into this very stuffy, buttoned up world where I was just going to be helping them put financial information online
Yeah.
and microsites. They were actually the funniest and most collaborative people that I'd worked with up until that point. They were it was completely opposite of the way I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
They were receptive to ideas. They actually there was no, well, we're going to do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. There was none of that. They were very receptive to new ideas and new challenges, and it was a great place to work. And I found that also to be the case at McKinsey as well. The people that I worked with there were among the smartest and most generous people that I've ever worked with. And someone that when I started there, they joked that I remember clearly, she said, our editorial process is a very simple 147-step procedure. And it was true, but it's very regimented and it's very regulated, and things there's multiple levels of approval and multiple steps, and it is an assembly line. However, it does work really smoothly and really well, and they were publishing, their thought leadership. They use it to get more work, to show that they have the expertise in biotech and aerospace and pretty much every industry. So there's smart people writing making the content, and equally smart people in the editorial side processing the content, and their global publishing team. Kudos to them. They're great.
Interesting. No, super interesting. And I think it's taken me a while to come to your EEE Northeast journey. But you telling me so I was not able to figure out what does EEE Northeast do. And the reason I asked you the same before we started rolling, you called it a company of companies, basically. Like it's a brand of brands in that case, right? So you guys are a bank on one front. You guys are an insurance company on the other front. You guys are a travel assistant company on the third front. You are a full stack travel agency on the other front. I don't know if you have more business as well. I'm pretty sure you do, right? And you guys manage out of a large giant, which is a legendary 125-year-old company, you managing a part of it. That's the Northeast part of it, basically. I have a lot of questions over here, right?
Okay.
Because here you are actually in multiple industries which have grown digitally the fastest in the last few years. No one ever thought insurance companies are going to go online and a click of a button, you'll be having insurance on your place. No one ever thought payments the way it is right now. You have the way the payments, loans, everything works in banking. No one thought it would be the way it is, right? So the digital nativeness of this industry has been really, really fast. While this has been a big part of it, content has played a big role into one, educating audiences, in the second front, selling products, both of it together. How did you start your role at EEE Northeast, and how it has evolved over a period of time? And would love to know all the facets of the the people and processes over here, because you ought to make a content flywheel where you're competing against largest of the largest giants in individual business units of yours, basically, right? And I'm just asking you this question at a broad level. I want you to go deeper into it, but make us understand more about the people part, the process part, and the strategy part. How do you look at it today? Do you have separate teams for each business lines? Or maybe you have a central desk which is working like a publishing company for a AAA Northeast, maybe in that case. How have you planned it? I'm always asking this question to people in my selfish interest of us at Pepper having a motto of making every company a content company, which I strongly believe in. And I think you proved the point there, because you have a large enough team right now that's managing this part. So love to understand insights on that.
My job at AAA Northeast was a gift.
Can you go deeper into that? How
Yeah. Well, my position, director of content, was a new position. I've only been there for just over a year, but the people that I was handed when I got the job, the people on my team are all, and each and every one of them is a fantastic content producer. I mean, I'm so lucky. I feel like I won the lottery. On social media, on our website, our SEO specialist, our copy editors, they're all just so great. I feel like I won. I feel like I won the lottery. There was no like. All I had to do was get up to speed with the company, which took a long time, but it was like I was made the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. You know, it was that sort of feeling that I was put in, and it was intimidating because they're so good. I kept saying, I get to work with these fantastic people. I'm so lucky. And I almost feel, imposter syndromes. Like I think some of them they should have my job. Not
People
really.
watching it,
Not
right?
really. Out of my cold dead hand. No, I mean it is a company of companies, and again, I think my experience being a generalist, I'm not an expert in the art world, but I can hold a conversation at a party. I'm not an expert in the aerospace industry, but I saw enough content at McKinsey that I know what people are. So it helps me. It helped me at AAA because I had to learn so many different business models.
A reader of all, master of one. I would put it this way.
Yeah, really, and the only thing I'm really an expert in is theater, and but it is a challenge because it's a 125-year-old company. It is a brand that has existed for that long that means different things to different people.
Yeah.
When you ask someone, if you could go out in Times Square right now and you would ask people, have you heard of AAA? People will say, oh yeah, they're the road assistance company. When I get a flat tire, or someone else might say, oh yeah, that's where my student loans come from. Or, oh my God, I went on a fabulous cruise last year because of AAA. I mean, we do everything.
Yeah.
And with that comes the complications of multiple regulations. We are an insurance company, so there is certain things we have to be careful with our content. We're also not journalists. It's not editorial content, so we don't have fair use protection. We can't just pick up an image or use a trademark name or a copyrighted name. We're not journalists. We're essentially marketers. So that's a new challenge for me because I've always come from
the publishing side.
From a publishing side or a journalism side where we had fair use protection. That makes it a little more difficult to be creative. But the team that I have and the way it is set up is so well thought out. I mean, our marketing team, it's about 120 people. And we are, as you said in your question, we are sort of like a service agency for all of the businesses. So they all come to us with their content requests, and we also generate content ideas for them. So it is mutual. We have regular brainstorms, and there is a calendar. It is cyclical. Like it's back to school time now. We're recording this in September, so a lot of our content is around driving safely and new laws and regulations and things like that to protect the kids who are walking to school or taking buses. Coming up will be the holidays, so a lot of our content will be around holiday travel and booking vacations and getting travel insurance. In the spring, we'll be talking about student loans because a lot of families are making decisions about where their kids are going to go to college. So it's cyclical. It's like a magazine where you cover the same thing every year, and that can be a challenge because you don't want to be stagnant. You want to keep coming up with good ideas.
Yeah.
But because it's a 125-year-old brand, we have an audience that has been with us for a long time. So you don't want to change it up too quickly because you don't want to alienate your older audience. And when I say older, I don't just mean in age. I mean just people who have been with us. But you also, in order to survive, you need to capture a younger audience.
Yeah, Gen Z.
And Gen Z is, as you know,
I saw your podcast. It's just targeting them. So
they're very elusive, and it's very hard to find the best way to reach them. It's always a challenge, and we try everything. We've tried emails specifically for them, and we've launched this new podcast. When I remember going back again when I was in publishing, working for magazines, I took a meeting with someone who was a company that wanted to help us put our content on Facebook. And Facebook had been around for maybe 4 or 5 years. And I remember very plainly their pitch saying, well, Facebook has almost 100 million users, and they predict by 2013 they may have 300 million users. Well, now we know they have, what, I don't know, 1 billion more users on Facebook. But if you had told me in 2011 that this new thing called Facebook that's sweeping the world would become primarily a social media for an older demographic, that wouldn't have been comprehensible to me because only kids were using Facebook.
Yeah.
But now it's TikTok, and podcasts. So it's a blessing and a curse. Because we have so many different businesses that we serve with our content, it almost makes it so that there is an unlimited number of things that we can try, because we have to talk to the insurance audience different than we talk to the travel audience. And you learn so much by doing that. And you can take lessons back and forth, and things that you learn that work over here or don't work, you can apply them to this thing.
You have a big ground to play, basically.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Last but not the least, right? I think the big question on AI that is there, for the audience, is I had prepped Mark for this question before this. So, okay. One, you mentioned an interesting thing, like you said, right? You're not fascinated by just the gung-ho about technologies coming in, just not the technologies, but any new trends coming in, maybe, right? You're one of the rare people because the industry kind of went gung-ho about AI, and I think everyone got super fascinated by it. People still don't know how to use it, or they're still figuring out a means to an end, right? I mean, I can tell you for sure, we were amidst the first few users of GPT-3 in the world. This is much a pre-chat GPT era. We built a couple of products using AI, had over 500,000 users on our platform. Over a period of time, realized, hey, people are not using it out of the 6 months. And the sole reason for that is because we realized that it is fascinating, but first of all, everyone thinks they're a great prompt engineer. No one is. Everyone thinks it's the easiest job in the world. No one is. Second, people still don't know what do they use it for. And third, it's not a natural integration in their workflow processes till now, right? Like you said, like when email had come, it was an addition on top of, hey, now I have to go online on a screen and type something, right?
Exactly.
It is not natural to you, basically, right? How have you thought of it? I pretty much understand you're using it definitely on a lot of your business side, which might be risk management, which might be some other parts of AI that's fascinating, but particularly in marketing, Where are you using it? Where you're not using it? Where do you foresee using it?
Yeah. I approach AI from my performance background. And, I'm a member of Actors Equity. I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild. And, last summer, the Screen Actors Guild was striking because they wanted AI protection from AI in all of their contracts.
Yeah.
And so I lean heavily on that side of protecting the artist from AI. I think one of the reasons why I'm never that excited about the latest and greatest technologies because I've come from such humble backgrounds where we didn't have the budget to go all in on these things, so we had to be cautious. But I'm more excited about AI than I was about email.
Of course.
I see the possibilities. What concerns me most is with content and with ideation and creating content. One of my, and I'm not the only one, but one of my criteria is originality. And my very, very nascent or primitive view of AI is the whole garbage in, garbage out factor of how I like the possibility, but how is this technology not going to be in some way derivative of something since it's using things that already exist to create new things. I'm tired when a movie comes out and it's a remake of another movie, or it's the same movie as this movie. It's the same plot. Plays anything. If there is not an element of originality, I have a hard time getting excited about it. I have matured in my life that I can actually not be the jaded, bitter Gen Xer that I used to be, and I can find new things because, we are running out of stories to tell, and we are running out of ways to tell them. So even if something isn't the most original piece of content, look for the things in it that may be original or may spark some inspiration someplace else. You don't have to be, been there, done that all the time. So with AI, I see the potential of what it can do. But like you said, being a master at prompts, that's the next direction, I think. If I was just coming out of college, that's what I would be looking at. I've talked to recruiters who I've worked with in getting positions in the past, and one of them said to me the other day, I got a request for a company for someone who has 3 to 5 years experience with AI and with generating prompts and things. It's like, who's got 3 to 5 years of experience doing that? It's only been around for a couple of years in the workspace. So, if I could have one piece of advice for someone who's into content strategy, lean heavily into that right now, because we're going to be using AI in a completely different way than we think we're going to use it 5 years from now.
So there are more than, by the way, just for reference, there are more than 5,000 positions for prompt engineers available on job boards across. I mean, if I was seeing the other day, there are more than 1,000 of them just on LinkedIn.
Do they pay well?
They do.
Good.
I mean, this is more so. So how I look at it is basically like, when Grammarly came into the world, every editor thought their job is gone, basically, right? But if you look at it, how it has been integrated in the workflows is now it's the best friend of editors. It's trying to make their lives much faster.
Yes.
I think that's the ideal use of AI. This is where it's going to be placed for. So if it's an artist who's making graphic design, if he or she were to make a graphic design in 3 days, might happen into a day, where half a day they ideate and half a day they get it made using prompts.
Yes.
Basically. So I think it's not about artists who are going to be replaced via AI, but it is about artists who don't know to use AI will be replaced by AI.
Right.
If I were to quote it that way. So I am a personal fan of that. But that is super good. I think this is a very new perspective, Mark, because I'm actually speaking for the first time to a marketer who has taken the underdog route against AI, which is like, hey, I'll use it only if it made sense.
We use it for administrative tasks. It's very helpful. I love
summarizing.
I love going on vacation and coming back and seeing a 20 email thread and hit summarize this thread and have it. That has changed my life. scheduling meetings and things like that, the menial tasks, the non-creative tasks, the housekeeping tasks. I think it's wonderful, and I'm all in on that. But right now, I'm taking a wait and watch approach to it.
Makes sense.
Especially working at the job that I am in now, being associated with so many industries that are heavily regulated. It does not behoove us at this time to use content that is generated when it still has to go through the same rigorous checking and
compliances.
I see it one day. It will definitely get there, but I think for things like banking, where
some time.
It might be some time before it's.
I mean, I was reading a funny post about AI the other day on LinkedIn. Someone had returned, "Hey AI. Can you just take care of my laundries and dishes at home?
Yes.
I'll make sure my job is done well at work."
Yeah. Can we use AI to remove the plastics from the oceans rather than write screenplays and plays? Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Fun.
The robots should be working for us. But no, I mean, again, I've seen so many changes in such a compact amount of time in my career, and I really can't imagine how we're going to be marketing. I mean, the amount of data that we'll be able to collect on our audiences, and how we'll be able to deliver the content that is explicitly perfect for them on a person-by-person basis. I think that's where we're going to see the most use for AI. It sounds creepy. When you think about it, but if you can remember how creeped out we were when we'd see an Amazon ad or something when we were, we hear people talking about. I was talking about these shoes, and Alexa must have heard me, because the next day I was served an ad for those shoes. It was like, well, that may have happened, or it could be coincidence, or it may be the other hundreds of data points that you complete throughout your daily life that ended up with the same result of being served that ad of those shoes. So is it creepy? It can be, but I think it's the new norm, and I think it will be very useful.
That is super good. I think we've got to know Mark as a person, Mark as a professional, Mark as an AI learner as well. Mm-hmm. I think last one is in my hands now.
Okay.
So I'm going to shoot out like a rapid fire to you, Mark.
Okay.
Love to get a sense around knowing the fun side of you. You got 6 seconds to answer every question.
Okay.
Just blurt out what was on the top of your head after I ask you that, okay?
Okay.
Comfort food, Mark.
Hamburgers.
Oh, it's hamburgers?
Absolutely. Pizza. Hamburger on a pizza.
Hamburger on a pizza. I should wait for another 6 seconds. I'll get to hear 3 more dishes from there, right? Casual brag. Like humble brag, baby.
Humble brag? I was chosen as one of the content leaders of the No. Humble brag. I have.
You come from an acting background.
I've sang at Carnegie Hall.
Super. What year is this?
1997.
Super. What's the last play you watched?
I watched a production of Athol Fugard's Master Harold and the Boys this past weekend at a little theater in Westchester. 3 actors on the stage, maybe 16 people in the audience on a Sunday night. A house is very small, probably only holds 40 people. One of the best productions that I've ever seen, because it was great storytelling, it was intimate, and you just felt like you were there. I mean, there was rain sound effects playing the whole time. There was rain coming down the windows in the back of this little thing, and this beautiful play took place right there, and it was just, I get goosebumps thinking about it.
How often do you go to theaters?
Not often enough.
Not often enough? You'd want to go more?
Yeah, I would love to. A lot of the best theater is not in the city; it's outside of the city. So you have to be adventurous.
Yeah. If you were to start the tent magazines again, would you do that right away? Now, in this era of influencers.
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't start a magazine today. I mean, it was a literary magazine, so it had a very limited reach. But
What would you want to make a version of it today, like an influencer version of it, maybe?
I don't think so. I think that ship has sailed. I'm on to different things now. I don't like to go back and repeat myself. I'd rather do something like, well, I'm working right now in Westchester with a small group of very talented people, and we have a little theater group, and we're putting on our own shows and writing our own shows and producing them. And I think that's giving
That's
me the
the
same
same
sort of
show.
nourishment that I had when I didn't publish my own literary magazine 20
That
years
is
ago.
super. If you were not being a marketer or a theater artist, what would you be?
A teacher.
A teacher?
Yes.
I thought you would say a sales guy.
No, I'm not a salesperson.
Not a salesperson at
Not
all?
at all. No, no.
Favorite holiday destination?
Good question. There are so many. I'd probably have to say Italy.
Italy?
Yeah, I would
When
love
have
to
you
go
been
back
last?
to Italy.
When did you go last?
Before my daughter was born, so 15 years ago.
Damn. And you still, it's one of the best.
Rome, Florence. I just
You
love it.
are the old school history art
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah.
You are that at heart.
Well, there's
basically.
but I don't like to go back to places because I feel there are so many places that I have to see, and it seems like the chances of seeing them are becoming fewer and fewer with things that's going on in the world. I'm lucky enough that I went to Egypt.
So nice. Last one. What is that one thing that kind of keeps you up at night in your current job? I mean, no, I'm not asking from a work perspective, but something that is keeping you going every single day at work.
I think it's just trying to keep up with the innovation.
The imposter syndrome, in some sense. Right?
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
also things are happening so rapidly. I think we have a tendency to keep our heads down and keep siloed because we know the things that work, and we keep repeating those things because they perform well. The hardest thing has always been for me, and it's a personality thing, it has nothing to do with where I work, but just being so focused on the job and not being aware of other things that are going around. That's why I think it's really important to go to conferences and learn what other people are talking about. I like to go to the larger conferences and find out the challenges that Ford Motor Company and Taco Bell and Netflix and all of the challenges that they're having marketing, because working for a smaller company, if we're not facing those challenges now ourselves, we probably soon will be.
Makes sense.
So I think that's a good way to stay abreast too.
Right.
I mean, I remember going to a conference where they were talking about influencers online, and that was a new concept to me, and I was like, influencers? You mean getting the audience to be your content creators? That's a very interesting idea. So that's where I first heard that. It was like I think it was somebody from Ford. So I brought that and other ideas back to our smaller team and said, look, this is what's on the horizon for us, and we should start thinking about it now.
that is super good, Mark. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you have fun.
I did. This was very fun.
You did a good job. Thank you so much for
Good.
keeping appraised us with all the answers, and I think the audience will have a lot more to learn from you. If there are any questions, guys, please put it up. Mark is there on all platforms. You can just bring it to him, to us, anyone. But it's been a fun session, Mark. Thank you so much for figuring out time in New York City, coming all the way to Times Square to shoot this up. And we're right across your favorite place in the city, if I'm not wrong, the Marquis. That's where you all looked up to when you grew up. So
We are right here, right
so you're
outside.
right here, right? So super. I think we're done with the session today. But thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah.